That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Treaty crunch talks. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, will sign a deal with Rwanda today. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, has the latest.
Well, we think he was going to talk to us. He'll talk to us a little later. Net migration crackdown. Yet another 5-point plan was set out by the government, the same Home Secretary yesterday, to slash migration by 300,000. That's 15 objectives so far from the Tories this year. Minister of Immigration Robert Jenrick spoke to us on GB News a little earlier.
Migration is far too high, and that's why we've worked so hard to bring forward this very significant set of measures. You're right to say that more things may need to be done. But without question, this is a big step forward.
And Harry versus the Home Office. It's the second day of the Duke of Sussex's legal challenge after his UK security protection was stripped back. Do you think your taxes should be spent on protecting the Prince?
And Nigel marches on. Hurrah for that. Nigel Farage survives to fight another day in the Australian jungle. But some, quite a lot of us actually, are unhappy about the lack of airtime he's getting on the show. He's being censored.
And you might have remembered us talking about Nella Rose. She's the influencer, and she had that horrible altercation with Fred Syriacs, who's the chef and restaurateur, where she was accusing him of saying something inappropriate, and she was mortally offended. And
she's intensely irritating, and she's out.
It turned the audience against her very, very quickly. So she was the second out last night after Frankie Dettori the night before. And on Nigel, we want to make him king of the jungle. I'm sure you do too. So if you want to vote for him, grab your phone, scan the QR code on the screen and download the app. You can vote for him 5 times a day for free. Let us know your thoughts as well this morning. And while you've got your phone in your hand, email us gbviews@gbnews.com. First, though, here's the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev, thank you very much. Good morning. It's 9:32. I'm Sam Francis in the GB Newsroom. Tory MPs have voted against the government last night in favour of speeding up compensation for victims of the infected blood scandal. 22 Conservatives backed the Labour-led amendment, which will see the body set up to operate the compensation scheme. It's the Prime Minister's first defeat in the Commons, with the Haemophilia Society saying Rishi Sunak should be ashamed that he was forced to do the right thing. Around 30,000 people were given contaminated blood in the 1970s and 80s. 33,000, rather, have died. The Home Secretary is in Rwanda as he works to secure a new treaty that the government hopes will revive its asylum policy. James Cleverly will spend the day meeting officials in Kigali, and he'll then discuss what's being called a migration and economic development partnership. It's hoped the new agreement, along with emergency legislation here at home, will address the issues that led to the Supreme Court ruling against the plan in November. Meanwhile, the Immigration Minister has insisted the first flights carrying asylum seekers will depart before the next general election. Here in the UK, Thames Water has warned it's in severe financial distress and a turnaround will take time. The troubled water company's profits dropped by 54% in the 6 months to September, and its debts have ballooned. It's reported around £1.3 billion of revenue, but spent a record £1 billion on network improvements. It comes days after its parent company warned it could run out of money by April unless it secures more funding. Interim bosses say immediate and radical action is needed to secure finances of the UK's biggest water supplier. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
So yet another 5-point plan announced yesterday in the Commons to reduce migration by 300,000, this time by the new Home Secretary, James Cleverly.
That's right. Care workers will be banned from bringing in dependents.
The foreign worker salary threshold will rise sharply to 38,700. That's up about 20,000.
Yeah, the occupation shortlist will also be reviewed.
A minimum income requirement for bringing dependents going up to 38,000.
There's also going to be a review of the graduate visa route.
So terrific stuff, and the government have got great headlines. It's the front page of the Telegraph, the Times, the Mail. I have to say, Bev, why now? Because if you were to talk to Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, or Suella Braverman, the previous Home Secretary, they'd say, we were trying to do this, and the person who blocked it was the Prime Minister, because he wasn't terribly engaged with it. And when he was in the Treasury, of course, he saw cheap migration as cheap labour, cheaper labour, which keeps wages down, keeps inflation down. Very noble. Yeah. But look at the impact it's been having on the country.
And there's this clunky idea, isn't there, that you measure the value of a country by its GDP. And there's this clunky equation that says that immigration leads to an increase in GDP. I think, on paper, if you're into numbers and you just look at the world through that sort of lens, then yes, lots of migration might make lots of sense. But it's much more nuanced than that. And for people living in this country who want to live in a country that they recognise, where they can get NHS appointments, where they can get school appointments, where they can get the police to come round if they're the victim of a crime, those two don't necessarily square with each other. So I can see they're trying to do something, but it feels a lot like too little too late.
The other thing is, it's not going to happen till the spring. Why can't it happen now? Because the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, well, she huffed and puffed like she was going to blow the house down in the Commons and all the things that were wrong with it. But she didn't say once whether they would oppose it. Yeah. And more to the point, Labour, as usual, didn't say what they would do, even though we know they want to cut immigration to 200,000. Yeah. Well, hang on, how are you going to do that when last year it was nearly 700,000?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing as well that really struck me this morning, the care home workers, admittedly, it's not that they haven't changed the salary threshold for that. The change is that those people can't bring their dependents with them, and therefore that will act as a deterrent. Well, if you're a Filipino nurse, and we need brilliant Filipino nurses, I'm sorry, but we do. You ask any doctors of some of the nationalities of the caring professions, those mothers might want to come over with their children. And actually, those are the people we're now saying, well, we're going to make it harder for you to come over. But I don't see how this is going to necessarily affect the vast swathes of young economic migrant men who come here at the moment.
Well, we'll be talking, of course, to somebody, a key figure from the care home industry later. But first of all, Mr. Cleverly, the Home Secretary, is in Rwanda. He's going to sign this new treaty, which the government hopes will answer some of the points raised by the Supreme Court, which chucked out the Rwanda plan last month.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, this is all the Prime Minister's mission to make the deal to send migrants there, work, even though the Supreme Court obviously ruled against this scheme. And we were discussing this yesterday, and we were trying to work out, weren't we, how this money being spent or this treaty is going to change that and somehow overrule the Supreme Court's decision. I'm still not entirely clear on how it's going to do that.
Chris Hope, our political editor, he knows everything. He's going to tell us. Chris is in Downing Street. Morning, Chris. The Home Secretary is in Rwanda. He's going to sign this treaty. This is different to the Memorandum of Understanding which we had before. I know this all sounds terribly technical, but how does signing a treaty make it more likely the government can sort out the difficulties they had with the Supreme Court last time?
Yeah, Andrew, you're right. And morning, Bev. It upgrades that Memorandum of Understanding agreed previously to reassure UK courts that any arrivals by small boats sent to Rwanda for processing won't be sent back to their home countries and put at risk, and almost to declare Rwanda a safe country. Behind me, the Cabinet is meeting without James Cleverly, the Home Secretary. He's in Rwanda signing that deal. He'll be back tonight, probably. Now, the Cabinet's got to work out how hard to go on this. Should they push through a law in Parliament to withdraw from the ECHR for asylum claims, or just only disapply them in small boats arrivals, or just merely pass a law to declare Rwanda a safe country? The first to arrive here was Victoria Prentice. She's the Attorney General, and she really could be on resignation watch. If the Cabinet decide to go much further and take a much firmer stance on the ECHR, she's the canary in the coal mine, and she was the person you might expect may resign. That would be a disaster for the government. We'll wait and see how that plays out. But it is a big deal, this, for the PM. We know that the reform to the right of the Tory party, they're saying that the election next year will be an immigration election. So it's very important for the Tory party to ensure that it can convince its supporters it can control immigration. Because let's face it, it hasn't done. Neither net migration nor illegal migration are under any sort of control. And that's why the government's taking action today.
And Chris, the government say this is, everybody says long overdue, but we read today that none of this is going to take effect until the spring anyway. And I saw Suella Braverman, who was sacked as Home Secretary, said, I welcome all of this. A lot of it she wanted to do when she was Home Secretary, but none of this is going to kick in much before the general election.
Yes, and of course, we all know about deadlines, Andrew, don't we? That ahead of that April deadline, there'll be a big surge in people applying to get in on the lower income rate, £26,000 a year, not £38,000 a year, which it will be. Essentially, the scheme's being made into a graduate visa scheme. Currently, it's much less than that, as I say, £26,000 a year to get a visa here. There'll be a big surge in applications, which probably will increase the net migration figure for next year, in a year when the government's trying to show control migration, with the election due, I expect, by the end of next year. So it's not great. I think they can show they're doing things, but the actual proof in the pudding will not be seen until after the election, and that could be too late for the Tory party.
All right, that's Chris Opal, political editor in Downing Street. We'll hear from him a little later in the programme.
Can I just clarify? Ben Habib is in the studio with us, the deputy leader of Reform UK. Morning, Ben.
Morning.
I think what I just heard Christopher Hope say there is that because they're trying to enact this now, there will be a rush for applications to come here.
I tweeted that this morning, yeah.
So the net migration will go up in 2024 in the run-up to an election.
Absolutely. I mean, it was daft as brushes. It suddenly dawned on me yesterday they needed to instantly apply the higher salary rate so that they could cut it dead. But what they've done is give everyone 6 months' notice, or 4 months' notice, whatever it is, to get their acts together and make a flurry of applications. So you're going to see a surge in immigration as you come into May.
But will those figures? We won't get the annual increase, will we? Till probably much later.
Yeah, is it July or?
So they'll avoid that, and then perhaps that averts what they're worrying about is a crisis in our care homes, which are already 150,000 short carers. So get the carers in a bit quick, and then let the measures kick in.
Yeah,
maybe there's method in their madness.
And they've had the 24-hour news cycle for the last 24 hours, haven't they?
Look, all the front pages, very positive, but also making the same point. Why now? Why not 2 years ago?
Yeah, why not 2 years ago? And the other point that I think is lost on people, if I may say so, is that the gross migration figures obviously much higher. So 1.2 million people came to the country last year. Under this measure, that would reduce it down to 900,000.
Still too much.
But it's still 1 million people. Yeah. And the 500,000 people that left the country are bright, young British citizens who are aspirational, and that is the brain drain in operation. So when you look at migration policy, you've really got to look at it in a holistic sense with what you're doing domestically to retain brainy Brits who you want to keep in. It's not just about importing high-skilled labour. It's about keeping brainy people here. And, that's very simple. You make it aspirational to be in the United Kingdom. You have to cut their taxes, you have to cut SME taxes, you have
build more houses.
Build more houses, you've got to make things work. And I know a lot of young people who are Democrats at heart but are leaving to work in the Middle East and other places which are not democracies but have a 0% tax rate. And they go, well, why should we be here bashing our heads against a broken economic system when we can go make money there?
And meanwhile, Ben, what is this going to do to stop a single boat crossing the Channel?
Well, this is obviously entirely legal migration, which is much worse than illegal migration. I'm going to be a bit fair to Rishi for a second. He has at least got that deal with the Albanians, which did reduce the figures from last year at around 46,000 coming across the Channel to 26,000 this year. And I'm also going to attribute tribute, if I may, while I'm on that subject, credit to Richard Tice, because it was Richard Tice who identified last June, do you remember?
Yeah.
That there was Albanians coming across the channel. And that tipped the government into doing a deal with Albania.
In collaboration with our very own Mark White, if you don't mind me saying so.
Absolutely, yeah.
But can I also can we remind people what the agreement was with Albania and why that's worked and what it's cost us, Ben?
Yeah, so the cost, I haven't got all the costs at my
that was a
fingertips.
bit...
No, but you're right to point it out.
£1,500 a person, I think, isn't it?
It's £50,000 a person.
That we give, but I think doesn't the Albanian person themselves get a little incentive? They get a little bong to go back.
They get, but I mean, if they're criminals, we then have to pay £53,000 per head in order for them to be imprisoned back in Albania. I mean, there's no shortage of cash when it comes to spraying it at the French, spraying it at the Albanians, spraying it at COP28. Yeah. But if you say, please, sir, could I have a little tax cut? You don't get it, you know, and that comes back, you know, squarely to legal migration and our inability to hold people in the United Kingdom and get British workers back into the workforce. But on illegal migration, I'm slightly darting around, but on illegal migration, ultimately there's only one control, and that is border control. Yeah. You have to enforce your borders. It's not about deportation. Deportation is what you do when your border control's gone wrong. And this idea that you can solve border control through domestic legal provisions allowing you to somehow eject people at a huge rate is a mistaken concept. We've got to understand that people have to be stopped at the point of entry and told quite politely, and if necessary forcefully, please turn around and go back to France.
Ben, stay with us, won't you? Because we're going to carry on this conversation. Industry bosses are warning that elderly people are going to find it harder to get the care they need because of this crackdown on foreign workers. The executive co-chairman of the National Care Association, Nadra Ahmed, joins us.
Morning, Nadra. Good to see you.
Good morning.
What will this mean in actuality? Give us some concrete examples of the kind of people who want to come here to be carers and how this a restriction on the number of dependents you can bring will change their choices.
So what we look for is skilled carers. That's what we're looking for. People that have some experience in their own country of supporting carers. That includes nurses. They've been working in hospitals. And so we look for the qualifications as well. So what we're actually looking for is skilled carers. As was mentioned earlier, we've got 152,000 vacancies. And out of a workforce of 1.6 million, 70,000 of them are international recruits. So if you imagine that 70,000 of those people hadn't come to the UK, we would be over 200,000 vacancies. The impact of them not being able to bring their families in will be the fact that these are dependents that they're bringing in. So we should have methodologies that actually make sure they are dependents. And the clue's in the word, isn't it? The people that are reliant on them for care and support. So leaving them somewhere else is just not feeling like a strong option. They've got them here. The other point around that is that that individual will be coming to a foreign land to support our vulnerable elderly. A very stressful role, and working long hours potentially, and then going home to nothing, to nobody, and having to do that year on year. And I think those are real challenges about the mental health of the people that we will be asking to come in. We have, we're trying to make sure we've got ethical recruitment, that there is pastoral care for them and appropriate accommodation.
Would be that there are some people who are coming here to work in the caring industry, but they're actually using it as an excuse to bring in 6 teenage boys who they then send out to be Uber drivers or whatever it is. Is that a stereotype that is misplaced?
Well, I think it is obviously something that's been quoted, and that is what's the decisions are based on. But actually, we ought to have much stronger looking much stronger methodology which looks at not making that happen. I think that's the challenge that we have to overcome. Generally speaking, what I'm hearing from providers since this announcement yesterday, I've had email after email, text after text saying we do have dependents that come in, but they're actually taking roles either within the care sector or around to support domestic work in the care homes or doing other work. So they're not just sitting around on benefits, which is what the perception was.
OK, thank you very much. Nadia Ahmed there, the Executive Co-Chair of the National Care Association.
We've still got Ben Habib with us. Got to talk to you about these extraordinary polls for the Reform UK. Double figures.
Yeah, double figures in 5 separate polls in a couple of weeks. We're quite pleased with that. But I think that's a reflection, really, on an imploding Conservative Party. We surged in the polls when Liz Truss was ousted from office. Yeah. And then we surged again when Suella Braverman was sacked. And every time the Conservative Party does something which demonstrates that they're in fact Liberal Democrats and not Tories, you know, Reform UK does well because we are genuinely Conservative with a small c.
What have you made of all this chatter about the fact that Nigel Farage, is his title honorary president?
I think he's president, yeah.
President of Reform, might go to the Conservative Party, Ben, if they need him.
Nigel is such a flirt, isn't he? And Nigel is he's a maverick, he's a flirt, he's stirring it up, he's putting a lot of, you know, he had that wonderful dance with Pretty. And,
at the Conservative Party conference.
And I think that kind of kicked the whole thing off. And, you know, he loves it. But he did speak at our conference a couple of months ago, and he said that wasn't likely to be, you know, happening.
Are you glad he's in the jungle? Is that helping Reform?
Well, you know, Nigel's not an active part of Reform UK. To the extent that we're doing well, I'm sure Nigel won't be offended if I say this. It's got nothing to do with Nigel. It's the fact that Reform UK is offering a vision for the United Kingdom, which neither of the main parties is offering.
Yeah. What did you make of Keir Starmer echoing or bringing the Thatcher?
Outrageous.
What did you make of that?
Well,
talking of vision.
Absolutely outrageous. You know, the man is a progressive ultimate socialist, and he's harking back to Thatcher in some kind of false way to grab those voters on the right who must be daft as brushes not to realise that Starmer is uber socialist. I mean, it's not going to work. It just proves him to be a liar, frankly.
Right, Ben, lovely to see you.
Stay with us. Thank you. It's second day of Prince Harry's 3-day High Court case against the Home Office over security arrangements.
That's right. The Duke of Sussex is challenging the decision that Prince Harry and his family would not be granted the same degree of protection when visiting the UK.
So the former head of Royal Protection, Di Davis, joins us now. Di, morning to you. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? If Prince Harry comes to Britain and representing the royal family on royal duties, he will have the same protection as any other member of the royal family. If he chooses to come here under his own steam, he can pay for himself and he can flipping well afford it.
Well, good morning. Yes, I totally agree with your last comment. Absolutely right. And the truth is, he actually gets protection, as you rightly say, every time anything to do with royals, and he's here as the Prince of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland. Never forget Northern Ireland. Yes, of course he gets it, and he has. The problem is, this is all hyped up. It's yet another Harry storm in a teacup. He thinks he should because he is sixth in line to the throne. But RAVAC, the committee that decides this, included a former colleague of mine, Commander Peter Loughborough, Lord Peter as he is now, and he had 11 years as the commander in overall command of Royalty Protection. He was on that committee, as I understand it, along with a member of the household, eminently sensible men. They are provided with the up-to-date intelligence, and it's from that intelligence and the threat risk that is carried out that they will decide whether anyone, including Harry, including other members of the royal family, will actually get protection. And what he wants is armed protection. When he comes here, and has done over a number of years, he brings his own protection teams who are not armed, but a number of them are former royalty protection officers. If there's a threat, if there's any kind of issue, he will be afforded the protection he wants. This is a storm in the cup, and it's going to cost you and I about £1 million by the time it's finished.
Gosh. And isn't it set a very dangerous precedent? Because if Harry is given permission, Harry and Meghan, to have armed protection, then it means that any country's leader or diplomats or, you know, the landed gentry from Dubai could come in and basically say that they want armed protection, and that changes everything in this country.
Well, again, you're absolutely right. There are only limited number. I won't go into details how many officers are in this particular section of royalty protection. There are a number, obviously, but again, if you started to dish them out willy-nilly, and it takes a lot of manpower and female power to protect just one individual. Now, if you spread out to Harry and Meghan and their children, if they deem to come, but you know, in truth, Britain still is a very safe country, particularly when you have your own security. What he wants is armed protection. Well, he's not going to get it, I hope. I hope that Judge Sitting will apply common sense to Harry he would to anyone else. He's not a working royal. Most of his cousins and aunties now don't have the level of security they had when I was doing the job. I had 22 of them. And they were all afforded 24-hour protection. So, no, I don't think he should have it, is my bottom line.
OK. Thank you, Di. Di Davis there. Let us know what you think. Up next, how many Home Secretaries does it take to approve a flight? We're going to talk to a top human rights lawyer to see if James Cleverly's visit to Rwanda can rescue Rishi Sunak's deportation plan. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here with the Met Office forecast for GB News. Marked contrasts in the weather across the UK, cold and frosty with some ice patches in the far north, but elsewhere actually rather a lot of cloud, frost-free, but outbreaks of rain continuing mostly where they left off at the end of yesterday. The rain does turn more showery across central and eastern England, and then the showers ease further west to sunny spells. But the brightest weather will be across Scotland, northern England, Northern Ireland as well. It's going to stay cold here with some icy patches first thing for northern Scotland, but actually for many a crisp winter's day. Same can't be said for the North Sea coast of England, where we're going to continue to see some showers and a keen breeze blowing into the evening. That does eventually also ease overnight, and with clear skies breaking out widely tonight, we're going to see another widespread frost with some freezing fog patches for central and southern Scotland, for example, into parts of northern England, especially the Vale of York. And some of these freezing fog patches will be slow to clear tomorrow morning, so continuing with the fog into lunchtime in some places. Away from the fog, actually.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Tuesday the 5th of December, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Beth Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
So Rwanda treaty crunch. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, is in the country to secure a deal today. Our political editor, Chris Hope, has the latest.
It's a big day here in Downing Street. Cleverly is in Rwanda. The cabinet behind me is signing off on the Rwanda deal. It's really important the Tories get this one right.
Net migration crackdown, yet another 5-point plan. They're all the rage these days, aren't they? It was set out by the government. This one's to slash migration. That's 15 objectives so far from the Conservatives this year.
And a GB News exclusive, a whistleblower has told us ex-convicts are able to evade significant court order restrictions by merely changing their names. Our reporter Charlie Peters has the details.
And proof of age for porn. New Ofcom rules mean that users of porn sites will have to upload their ID to prove they're over 18. Are you in support of that?
And of course, GB News' Nigel Farage. He's doing very well. He's got through the jungle through the second night of voting. The ghastly Nella got voted out.
If you want to vote for Nigel, grab your phone, scan the QR code on the screen and download the app. You can vote for him 5 times a day for free.
And I've done just that.
Have you?
I have.
Who put the app on your phone for
Not
you?
me, Callum here.
Ah, that's nice. You found a young person.
Somebody under the age of 27. Because I couldn't have done it.
Oh, brilliant. Lots to talk about this morning. Get in touch with us with your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address, as always. First, though, here is Sam Harris with your very latest news.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's just gone 2 minutes past 10. I'm Sam Francis in the GB Newsroom. Tory MPs voted against the government last night in favour of speeding up compensation for victims of the infected blood scandal. 22 Conservatives backed the Labour-led amendment to set up a body to operate the compensation scheme. It was the Prime Minister's first defeat in the Commons, with the Haemophilia Society saying that Rishi Sunak should be ashamed that he was forced to do the right thing. Around 30,000 people were given contaminated blood in the 1970s and 80s, and since then 3,000 have died. The Home Secretary is in Rwanda as he works to secure a new treaty. The government hopes that it will revive its asylum policy. James Cleverly will spend the day meeting officials in Kigali. He'll discuss what's been called a migration and economic development partnership. It's hoped the new agreement, along with emergency legislation here at home, will address the issues that led to the Supreme Court ruling against the plan in November. Meanwhile, the Immigration Minister has insisted that the flights will carry asylum seekers from the next general election. Here in the UK, Thames Water has warned that it's in severe financial distress and a turnaround will take time. The troubled water company's profits dropped by 54% in the 6 months to September as its debts ballooned. It reported around £1.3 billion in revenue but spent a record £1 billion on network improvements. It comes days after its parent company warned it could run out of money by April unless it secures more funding. Interim bosses say immediate and radical action is needed to secure the finances of the UK's biggest water supplier. Strikes by train drivers across parts of England are continuing today, causing delays and gridlock across the country. No C2C trains are running, while Greater Anglia services are also disrupted. More operators are set to strike in the coming days. Train drivers across England started a week-long ban on overtime on Friday, which is continuing to disrupt services. The managing director of C2C Trains says he's disappointed that an agreement hasn't yet been reached with the ASLEF union. And trans women prisoners who've hurt or threatened women or girls will not be held in female prisons in Scotland. A new policy set out by the Scottish Prison Service will take an individualised approach to housing transgender people. It means some prisoners will initially be placed in male prisons until more information is known about whether they should be housed in accordance with their chosen gender. Scotland's Justice Secretary says the policy supports the rights of transgender people and the welfare of prisoners and staff. A legal challenge over Prince Harry's security arrangements will be held at the High Court later. The Duke of Sussex was stripped of special protections normally afforded to royals when he stepped back from his role in 2020. Instead, he wants to pay police officers for security services when he and his family visit the UK. The previous decade has been the hottest on record, with polar and mountain ice melting at unprecedented rates. That's according to the United Nations Climate Agency. They say that Antarctic ice sheet lost nearly 75% more ice between 2011 and 2020 than it did 10 years before. The hottest years of the decade were 2016 and 2020. Here in the UK, more than 60 flood warnings are in place across England as heavy rain pushed out the snow. It follows a night of sub-zero temperatures and ice across the north of Scotland, where temperatures dipped as low as -10 overnight. There's a further 182 flood alerts, with people urged to stay cautious. And shoppers appear to be sticking to plans for a budget Christmas this year, with spending down. That's despite Black Friday. UK retail sales increased by just 2.7% in November. That's a significant drop on last year's figures. And the numbers aren't adjusted for inflation either, masking a likely drop in the number of sales once higher prices are taken into account. This is GB News across the UK, on your TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It's 10:06. Right, what have you been saying at home? Thank you very much for getting in touch with us this morning. Andy has said, don't the government understand? We want immigration under control now, not in 4 months' time.
I quite agree.
Jackie's also said, they say we need immigrants to pick our strawberries, be care workers, etc. But the question that is never asked is, what happened to the ones who came in last year to do those jobs? Have they all now gone home?
And also, what about the 17,000 asylum seekers who have vanished? The Permanent Secretary last week in the House of Commons giving evidence. Don't know where they are. They've gone. They've disappeared. That's just the ones they know about.
Yeah.
Jeffrey says £480 million to France, 140 million to Rwanda. Jeffrey, there may be another 15 million on the way. They're not confirming it, but they're not quite denying it, the government. And still nothing. What a total waste of money when people are struggling here.
Couldn't agree more. And we've been talking about this morning because I was saying earlier about how you judge a country's value. And politicians look at GDP. They want that to go up. And immigration does show evidence that if you increase the number of people here, your GDP will go up. But I don't think that's just what life is all about. And Jane has said, in reality, you should measure a country by how well it treats its most vulnerable people. In my opinion, we are not that good. You're so right, Jane. And this one on that same issue, actually, Steve has said, the problem with allowing care workers in with their dependents is the cost of supporting them with in-work benefits. We'd be far better off subsidising care workers' wages with those costs and increase them from 20,000 to 30,000, which would attract far more Brits to do the job. No extra pressure on any of our services, no overpopulation. Such a great idea, Steve.
And it's so obvious, it's staring right under the government's nose. But again, they probably don't want to do that because they think that's going to put up inflation, because of wage inflation, but it would make sense.
And then other industries would say, well, if you can subsidise their wages, can't you subsidise ours as well?
But this is a very special profession, isn't it, carers?
Yeah.
And how much are they already saving the government because so many carers do the job at home for their family and the people they love.
Absolutely. Keep in touch with us this morning, GBnews at gbnews.com.
Now, the Home Secretary is in Rwanda. He's going to sign a new treaty with the country today. So
joining us now is GBnews' political editor, Christopher Hope. Morning, Chris. For anybody just tuning in, what's been going on in Rwanda, and why is this visit going to make any difference whatsoever?
It's all about these small boats crossings, Bev and Andrew, isn't it, across the south coast. Now, I can tell you 1 year, 5 months and 20 days ago, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that we couldn't try and process people in Rwanda who arrive here illegally across the south coast because it would breach their human rights. Since then, 63,852 migrants have made that crossing because the government can't stop it. They want to try and break this model of these gang masters who run these operations and say if you arrive here legally, you'll go to Rwanda to be processed. Now, the Supreme Court has supported that ruling. The government is now trying to change laws to make sure they can do it. That involves a new treaty with Rwanda. That's where James Cleverly is today, the Home Secretary. The government is saying to the courts that this new treaty will show that if you are processed in Rwanda, you can't be sent back to the country you're coming from, so you can't be put at risk. They're hoping that'll be enough to assure the Supreme Court that this plan can go ahead. Separate to that, they're looking at changing the law on whether to disapply human rights rules to those who arrive illegally, whether to say it arrives to all asylum seekers, just those arriving through small boats, or even just changing the law in Parliament to declare Rwanda a safe country. All that is at play this week because the government has to get a grip on the small boats crisis. We know what they're doing on net migration. They want to cut that by 300,000. We'll wait and see if that works out. That's illegal numbers coming here. The illegal numbers is the new focus behind me in Cabinet. So far, we've seen the Cabinet go in. Whether they come out smiling, we'll wait and see. Victoria Prentice is the Attorney General. She's been on resignation watch. If she's not happy with what is agreed here, if they do try and push to leave the ECHR in a very bespoke way, or at least disapply the rules in a very bespoke way, she could resign. So it's quite tense here in Downing Street, and we'll see how that meeting ends shortly. And the plan should be set out probably by Thursday.
Chris, I was at a reception last night, maybe you're at the same one, lots of Tory MPs and peers there. I didn't meet one who thought there would be a flight to Rwanda in the air before June. And I suspect more and more that we may be having an early election.
Yeah, well, the Prime Minister told us, didn't he, he wants the first flight to take off in the spring. That means May, but there's a heck of a long way to go before that. They've got to get this bill through the Commons. The Lords will be a real problem. As you know, the government doesn't have a majority in House of Lords. And whether they can use the Parliament Act, that's not very clear because, of course, this idea was not in the manifesto. So you're absolutely right. I think flights may not take off until May, and if we have an election then, that might be the government can say, look what we're going to try and do. But if they go later in the year and there's still no flights taking off and more small boats crossing next summer, don't forget France might be distracted by the Olympics, all sorts of matters might be in play. The one thing going for the government is the Labour's got no real answer on this. They appear to be more content with migration numbers, and that is all they've got going for them. At least the Tories are trying to do something. Labour's answer is weaker.
All right, thank you very much, Christopher. Do you think the British public are so stupid that if they call an election in, say, June, and the first flights have taken off in May, that people are going to go, oh, well, I'm going to vote Conservative now then because they've fixed it. Suddenly they've fixed it.
Well,
will it make any difference?
Well, I think people do want... There's been so much invested in this Rwanda policy. I think it would be a big deal for the Tories to get the planes up in the air. But you're going to have at least one a day.
It would.
Every day for weeks and weeks and weeks. And how many can we... And, of course, the point about the Rwanda policy is the deterrent. if they do get flights up, does it then stop the boats coming in? Do they then think, right, we'll go to Ireland? But that will be the test. So, I mean, I hope it works, because they've got to do something, because we cannot sustain 1.2 million people coming in every year, because that's the gross figure. As Ben Rabid rightly pointed out, 400,000 are leaving, but there often are young, bright things who are going off to be doctors and teachers abroad, which is very sad.
OK, let's think about this a little more in a little more depth. Human rights lawyer Dr. Shoaib Khan joins us now. Shoaib, good morning. When you're listening to this debate, are you seeing this is going to be a solution? That the process occurring in Rwanda at the moment, this treaty being signed, is going to lead to planes taking off, which is going to lead to it being a deterrent. Do you think that's going to work?
Hi, no, I don't. I mean, obviously, even within that, brief question, there's quite a few things. Firstly, is Rwanda generally, the plan a deterrent? Secondly, will what James Cleverly's up to today work? Thirdly, will it get through the Commons? Will it actually make any difference? Fourthly, will it lead to any planes in the air? So those are all completely, I think there are just so many hurdles and obstacles and problems, legal and practical, with each of those steps. I just don't think it's going to happen. But particularly in terms of what he's doing today, and, as your political correspondent there was explaining, on the one hand, we want to sign a new international treaty because we believe in international law. And obviously, once Rwanda signs that, then, there's no way they'll back out. And then in the same sentence, we're saying we want to pull out or exclude somehow or limit the effect of the ECHR, which is an international treaty we've been signed up to for decades. And obviously, this is the Tory government, who proudly boast about, we're just breaching international law in a specific limited way. So what if we today sign this deal with Rwanda, where they promise we won't send these people back, and then they decide to breach that in a limited, specific way? Oh, we'll just send Afghans back, or we'll just send Libyans back, we'll just send Syrian people back. So that's exactly the point, and that's what we say. And I'm guessing that's probably Victoria Prentice's point as well, where we just said, she's on resignation watch. As a lawyer, she understands the importance of upholding international law for everyone, whether you like that specific law or not. And I think that's the issue. The Supreme Court, going through all the evidence over the past decades, found Rwanda was not a safe country for these people. And now suddenly, we've got this magic wand of emergency legislation, and we will hereby declare Rwanda to be safe. Personally, I think that's a really childish, ridiculous thing to say. Why do we work so hard on everything else? Why don't we just pass emergency legislation? The NHS is now hereby, declared perfect. No one has any problems. Everyone is a millionaire in the UK. The UK is hereby declared the best country in the world. Because no, you actually have to do things to make things better. You can't just declare them safe, even if Parliament declares it. And so I think there are lots of legal issues with this plan.
Yeah, but Dr. Shoaib, isn't one of the problems people like you, the great human rights lawyers industry, which blocks every attempt by the government to deport people to countries because they don't always believe they're genuine? And we talk quite regularly on this programme to one of your colleagues, David Hay, who's a human rights lawyer, and he says only 20% of the people he sees he thinks are genuine cases. So that means 80% are fraudulent, and human rights lawyers like you are supporting them.
I mean, obviously, I don't recognise those figures at all.
Well, he does. He's been doing it for a very long time.
Of course. So even under, Theresa May, Priti Patel, Sweta Braverman, James Cleverly now, obviously, not particularly lefty loonies, 60, 70, 80% of applicants are granted asylum. And so why are they granting asylum if these are all bogus claims? So, I mean, and even then, even when they claim those, even the ones that are refused, when they go to court, more than half of those, the courts then overturn because they are genuine asylum seekers. And then even if looking at this, we're talking about a year ago when we were all saying this plan is illegal. Obviously, we're just lefty extremists, creating trouble for the Tories. But now the UK Supreme Court has said that. Is that the same thing?
If they're genuine asylum seekers, why are they paying money to cross the channel?
Because there's no other way of them to get here. Ukrainians didn't have to. Afghans did on that 2 flights we sent didn't have to. Because we sent planes and brought them here like humans.
Well, why are so many of them? Why are so many of them young men in their 20s and 30s?
Because we don't want babies and children.
Because they're economic migrants, that's why.
Babies come here, babies
they're economic migrants.
We don't. Sorry?
They're economic migrants. That's why.
No, they're not. I mean,
yes, they are.
How do we know?
Well, how do you know they're not?
Obviously.
They chuck their papers over the side of the boats.
Yes, because then why are 60 to 70, 80% of them granted asylum in the very, very strict asylum system we have right now. Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, Theresa May, established this asylum system. 60-70% of people the Home Office believes are genuine. So I just don't understand that. And you're asking, why do they come here? That's why there are no safe legal routes. How are these people? Why didn't Ukrainians have to do that? Because we sent planes there and brought them here. In Afghanistan even, we actually literally prioritized bringing dogs over people. We saw people hanging off planes. Were they economic migrants too? What do we do about that? And that's the point. Palestine, we know, already will create refugees. Syria, Libya, so many other countries. Where are the flights bringing people? Are we saying no one there, not a single person, is a genuine asylum seeker?
So Shoaib, would you be in
come over on boats?
Would you be in support of there being some sort of online application system from any country in the world whereby you can lodge your application, you're not having to get on a boat, it can be assessed in the UK, and then you're either told yes or no?
Of course, such an absolute dream. That's
and
what
why
we've been
does that
calling
not
on for
exist?
decades. Because we don't want that. This is what we like. This is what the Tories like. This is the way going to win an election. What else are they winning, even fighting this next election on, other than Rwanda? That's the one point that everyone's talking about.
But they're losing that
decades
fight.
ago.
But that's not working. The logic of that doesn't stack up because this issue is high on the list of everybody's priorities. And if they could implement an online application system which would stop the boats overnight, that would be great for the Conservatives. Why aren't they doing it?
Because if Theresa May had sorted it out, how would Suella Braverman ever have become Home Secretary? How would she ever be in the race to... I mean, I think that's quite an obvious thing. Why I don't understand how people don't understand that. I mean, that is what's happening. This is the one issue. What else? Why are we not talking about the NHS, the, homeless veterans, our homeless, British people on the streets right now? Because this is what people are talking about. This is what will win the election. This is what the Tories want. They don't want us focusing on those things. If they had resolved this, why aren't we talking about Ukrainian asylum seekers? We brought in and integrated hundreds of thousands of them. And that's been absolutely fantastic, literally within our homes. Why is that not an issue? Because
I can't believe that's true.
And the NHS.
But I find it hard to believe. I think what you've just said is the British government do not want an online application system which would prevent dinghies taking off because it helps them with their political strategy and their Machiavellian moves to put people in certain positions. That just seems incredibly implausible.
Oh, well, it's very plausible if you look at what's happened. I mean, I don't know. Do you really think that's, even yourself in the position you're in, understanding that? Do you think that's implausible? I mean, okay, what are the top three things right now the British people will, even right now we were talking about, whether the flight takes off in May or June. What's happening in May? Why is May an important month? Because of the election. What's that got to do with Rwanda? What's that got to do with the treaty? What's that got to do with illegal immigrants?
So you mean whilst we're talking about this, we're not talking about those other issues that might reflect badly on the Conservatives?
But Shoaib, you're missing the point.
This reflects terribly.
You're missing the point. The Tories are getting a hammering because they're not getting to grips with immigration because they're being outmanoeuvred by the great human rights industry lobby, which you're part of.
Well, you just suggested a solution which is perfectly plausible and practical, and I support that. That's what we're actually calling for. We've been suggesting that for years. Why can't British embassies around the world take in asylum applications, process them, and there are flights for people who are successful?
But is that because, Shoaib, sorry to interrupt you, but I really do want to hear your expertise on this. Is that because the numbers would increase because there would be so many millions of people with legitimate claims to come from war-torn countries that the government legally would not be able to say no?
I don't know if, would the numbers increase? We've seen so many. And secondly, the whole point is, but it would answer all our questions about why are these all young men? Because young men can make this thousands of miles of, this sea voyage. At least that way we could bring in the women, we can bring in disabled people, we can bring in people on life support, we can bring in the children. So the point is, I just don't understand why can't we do that? I don't know about the figures. I'm not sure if they would necessarily go up. And what if everyone started doing that? Then yes, that's the point. All the countries will distribute the refugees. The point is these are needy people. We, countries, the West, rich countries, people with food, people with money, have to help them.
And
So
it would be
why don't
wonderful,
we?
Shoaib, and it would be wonderful if we could take everybody that needed
No, we haven't got the room.
safety, but we do not have the room, we do not have the resources, we do not have the public services. I really appreciate your time, though, this morning. Thank you so much. Human rights lawyer Dr. Shoaib Khan there.
I'm sorry, the human rights lawyers in the industry are part of the problem.
Yeah, but that's really interesting what he was saying then about the fact that because there is no... I've asked this to several people in the studios, never really got a clear answer as to why we don't have that. If there was an online application system whereby you could say, I live here, this is why I have to come over there, and we could say from the safety of an office in Westminster, yes, or computer says no. And that's it, done. No boats, no numbers, we control it. If I'm missing something, let me know, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Well, because the economic migrants don't want to do that because they won't get through, so they come on the boats. Which costs thousands of pounds.
But then if you have a system, you can say, well, I'm sorry, if you come on a boat, we literally turn you straight back.
Well,
You can never apply for asylum if you come on a boat, because we could do it on your computer.
Well, they should all be turned back because they're coming here illegally. They should all be turned back.
Right, moving on. An exclusive GB News investigation has revealed that sex offenders can dodge their public protection orders by changing their names. Are these putting people at risk? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 10:27. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So a GB News investigation has unveiled allegations sex offenders can dodge their public protection restrictions by changing their names when they apply for work.
That's right. A whistleblower said that in one case, he had no power to stop a paedophile from using an alias when seeking support from a job centre.
Charlie Peters has this exclusive report.
When a prisoner is released, they are offered support to get a job and get their life back on track. Serious offenders are put under severe restrictions on where they can work and who they can work with, and they're monitored to protect the public and avoid reoffending. Yet astonishingly, GB News has learnt that former convicts are able to change their names when applying for work, making it difficult for employers to learn about their criminal past and convictions. The National Probation Service works with job centres like this one in Oxford to monitor convicts as they support their return to work. And it's staff here and at other job centres who have told GB News that ex-convicts, including at least 3 sex offenders, were able to dodge restrictions by using an alias when applying for work. Mark is a former civil servant who recently told us about how his job centre was mismanaging dangerous ex-offenders. But in new claims, he has told us about how the probation service had sent his job centre a file on a dangerous ex-prisoner using their alias.
So that meant that when the offender went to the job centre, there was no intelligence on file for them. It's all under a different name, so they could get work or devices with no restrictions in place.
In one case, a sex offender who had searched for victims on social media was able to change his name on their DWP account, despite being a repeat offender. In another scandal, Mark said he had no power to stop a paedophile who had raped a 15-year-old girl from changing his name to a female name, which meant that any future employers could now miss vital intelligence.
This child rapist decided that they wanted to become a woman. They could have changed their name and it would not have matched the name for their restrictions.
When Mark contacted the National Probation Service to raise the alarm about an alias case, the response he got back from an officer was, "Wow, you definitely have wells of patience to go through all that." The government is calling for a change in the law to stop sex offenders being able to enjoy their freedom with a new identity.
The government will also bring forward amendments to the bill to restrict the ability of registered sex offenders to change their names in certain circumstances.
Mark said that he was overseeing around 170 former prisoners returning to the workplace following their release, of which 50 were considered a risk and had restrictions. He admits that he has no idea how many were using an alias, potentially escaping their monitoring and employment restrictions. Mark contacted senior civil servants about a strategy to bypass this problem by searching for claimants using their national insurance number, which cannot be changed.
This initiative was implemented. Only months later, it vanished. It had been acknowledged this tool was needed, and for reasons unknown, it was removed.
Charlie Peters, GB News, Oxford.
In a statement, the Ministry of Justice said the UK has some of the toughest powers in the world to deal with sex offenders, and those managed on a licence must gain permission from the probation service before taking up any jobs.
They must inform the relevant authorities if they change their name and face recall to prison if they fail to do so. Well, GB News' reporter Charlie Peters joins us now.
They say they must inform the authorities. Well, they're clearly not.
Well, here's the problem. This is what the whistleblower is claiming to us in these fresh revelations. Remember, last month we had a report where a whistleblower told us that the DWP and the National Probation Service were failing to correctly manage dangerous ex-prisoners. Intelligence files on their restrictions, such as who they can work with and where they can work, were not being managed properly. And in these fresh claims, this is being said, it's being alleged that the documentation is not being connected to the right names in some circumstances because ex-prisoners on their universal credit account, they can change their name online and immediately it's changed on the system. Now, it's understood that the Ministry of Justice policy is that the work coach, the person on the coalface in the job centre, has to approve that name change by getting some ID and other situations there. But that change is made immediately. It's the only name seen on the account. So they're relying on the vigilance of work coaches to ensure that information is transferred from the National Probation Service to the universal credit claimant. If it's not, you could have a situation where a registered sex offender is able to apply for work and devices and training opportunities without the right restrictions being put in place. Many work coaches I've spoken to say that this situation is not fit for purpose.
OK, super. Thank you, Charlie. Charlie Peters there.
Good story.
Up next, Sam Francis with your news headlines.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 10:33. I'm Sam Francis in the GB Newsroom. The headlines this hour. Tory MPs have voted against the government last night in favour of speeding up compensation for the victims of the infected blood scandal. 22 Conservatives backed the Labour-led amendment to set up a body to operate the compensation scheme. It was the Prime Minister's first defeat in the Commons, with the Haemophilia Society saying that Rishi Sunak should be ashamed that he was forced to do the right thing. Around 30,000 people were given contaminated blood in the 1970s and 80s. Since then, 3,000 have died. The Home Secretary is in Rwanda as he works to secure a new treaty that the government hopes will revive its asylum policy. James Cleverly will spend the day meeting officials in Kigali, where he'll discuss what's being called a migration and economic development partnership. It's hoped the new agreement, along with emergency legislation here at home, will address the issues that led to the Supreme Court's ruling against the plan in November. Here in the UK, Thames Water has warned that it's in severe financial distress and a turnaround will take time. The troubled water company's profits dropped by 54% in the 6 months to September as its debts ballooned. It reported around £1.3 billion of revenue, but it spent a record £1 billion on network improvements. It comes days after its parent company warned it could run out of money by April. That's unless it secures more funding. Interim bosses say immediate and radical action is needed to secure the finances of the UK's biggest water supplier. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2632 and €1.1661 euros. The price of gold is £1,605.23 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,480 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sam. Still to come. Christmas crack 'em up. The public has voted on the best Christmas gags. Personally, I don't like Christmas puns. I think they could be bad for your elf.
Who wrote that?
Not me.
Off with his head. We know who did it.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And it's 10:40 with Britain's News and on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bed. We have our fabulous panel here, author and political commentator Tonya Buxton and our great friend, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson.
Right, Tonya, Greta Thunberg and some of her mates have been talking about the fact that there'll be no climate justice without human rights. It's got the wokest, worthiest article in the newspaper today, presumably.
Why are we talking about that little rancid thing again? I mean, I just
What did you call her?
Rancid thing.
She's inspiring a generation, Tonya Buxton.
Can't call her rancid, can we? That's a bit harsh.
I think that
irritating.
she's causing and irritating. I think she's causing a lot of mental health issues in the younger generation. I mean, I think it's been admitted that she is on the spectrum, and I think a lot of the time, what she does, she kind of goes down. Her parents themselves have said that she would be in having to take a lot of mental health care if she wasn't kind of running with this. So she gets this thing in her head and she goes. And actually, what she's doing is a great deal of harm to our youngsters because they're listening to her, and she's everywhere. She's on every news channel. She's everywhere. I hate the fact that she's here. I mean, I like her colleague Aid Nielsen because he doesn't know whether he's Martha or Arthur.
No. But that's
I mean,
the
he
point.
really doesn't know. He says all...
The column in The Guardian.
The column in The Guardian, which is saying their pronouns, he says all pronouns. I mean...
So how many pronouns can you be, then?
I don't know. You could be...
about 300 in there, Nigel.
Right. You could be dog,
Apparently.
he, she, them, they. It's so stupid. It beggars belief.
I mean, it does mean you can be... that on the pronoun front, it means that he doesn't mind terribly. So he can be a they, them, theirs, or a he, him, his.
What about an it? Can you be an it?
Well, if he goes for all pronouns, then the answer must be yes, mustn't it?
Right.
Yes,
Well, I mean, why would you ask me? I don't know. I don't understand this whole obsession with pronouns.
I don't go in for pronouns either. But I mean, if people want
Mr.,
to have...
Mr.
Ms.
Mrs.
Mrs. I'm a Mrs.
Yeah, right.
I am.
We're
Mrs.
We're very boring.
But my main point is this just feels like a deflection. It feels like a getting attention where we're talking about stupidity. And it's unbelievable, non-common sense stupidity, and we're giving it airtime.
And your argument, then, is that she's Greta Thunberg and her cohort of thems, they are exaggerating the climate emergency, and therefore that is what's keeping teenagers awake at night. Maybe teenagers need to be aware of...
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as Tonya just did on Greta Thunberg.
You don't think she's rancid?
No, I don't think she is, no.
Right.
I think
Do you think she's intensely irritating?
She's got every right... No, I think she's got every right to actually
but do you think
champion
she's irritating?
She can be irritating,
yes.
But then...
I've never known when she isn't.
A lot of people who... even I support are actually irritating.
I think she's malleable, is what I think.
The point here is that I'm not sure that climate change activists should be talking about the war in Gaza. I mean, they are separate things.
Yeah.
And this kind of justification that climate change activists have got to believe in human rights and therefore every human right then falls into their purview has got to be wrong.
That's the twisted part about it, isn't it? That if you believe in one thing, then you have to believe all these other things. And that's where it's so wrong, because it stops the debate. I mean, what's happened in society today and what the snowflakes are struggling with is that they don't debate anymore.
No.
We used to have great debates when I was at university. Now you're only allowed to debate one side of the coin. So there's people debating the same thing because people are getting cancelled all the time.
And you know what? Which sort of leads us on a little bit. I just want to talk about I'm a Celebrity just for a moment, because Nella Rose got voted out last night. And actually, in her interview with Anton Deck, when she came out, she actually said, it was unusual for me to be with people who don't think like I do.
Yeah.
And she said, so the conversations with Fred Syriacs or with Nigel, thank you, Nigel Farage. I'm looking at another Nigel and I can't remember his name.
The other one.
That actually, she said, I am never with people who don't share my opinion. That's a damning indictment on that generation, isn't it?
That's right. Well, I mean, it may be because she's on social media, but a social media star.
Correct.
I mean, that's the real problem about free speech is that big tech is now running it, and that's where it becomes difficult. So if they're tailoring content towards your social media account, which is based on what you've liked before, all that will do is reinforce what you already believe, and you won't get to see other opinions or whatever. So Nella is an absolute classic there, that she's in that kind of social media world, doesn't get exposed to ideas from outside.
Yeah.
And it goes further. At the moment, that the Google, Facebook, they tend to decide what we are reading.
Yeah.
I mean, newspaper websites, all media websites, if you want to get big numbers, you've got to go along with their algorithm. So they decide what is going to be promoted. And I think that they are probably biggest danger to free speech at the moment.
So there's no more freedom of speech, is there? Because you're being manipulated and fed, nozzled through these avenues. And this is where it's so wrong. And this is where it's affecting our kids.
I wonder if she'll learn from this, that there is a different view out there. And I think the shock of being booted out of the jungle so quickly might do her some good.
She was, if you went to the bookies at the beginning,
she was the favourite.
She was one of the favourites, yeah. And I think she's lost quite a few followers because...
Has she?
Yeah, she has. For the two people, like when Fred, I'm not a fan of Fred. I think he's so bossy. His whole cooking thing would drive me. Can you imagine if I was in there with him?
There'd be a clash.
Yeah, if you're not watching it, basically Josie Gibson from This Morning is now the official chef, and Fred cannot let her do it without interfering and telling her how to do it differently.
So adorable, but doesn't matter. Everybody can cook, and everybody should be allowed to experiment. It's not about.
But if I was in the
dictator.
jungle with you, Tonya, I would say, look, you do the cooking.
So
that would be fun.
I'd do the washing up. I'd be happy to do the washing up. And you do the cooking.
Josie wants to have a go. So
and she's good.
And she's good, and stop being so bossy. But so the arguments that Nella had with
Fred... She made some lousy fritters last night.
No, they were terrible, weren't they?
She did.
Anyway, but the point is that these two arguments that she had with the two allegedly white men are the ones that have lost her followers, which is really interesting.
Really interesting,
Yeah.
I wonder how quickly she protests that she was kicked out because people didn't object to the fact, perhaps, at her ethnicity.
I mean...
I hope she doesn't, because she was kicked out because she was intensely irritating.
Absolutely.
I rather liked her. I thought in the early days...
Of course you did.
In
the early days, well, we all did, but then when she had that interaction with Fred Syriacs...
Yeah, they didn't help,
where he had said something that she had misinterpreted...
Willfully, I think.
Perhaps willfully misinterpreted, caused an argument and didn't talk to him, and it was a really horrible... character, kind of insight into her character, actually, that she was going to be that nasty to him. Really unpleasant. And I think the audience just didn't forgive her from that point onwards, did they?
No.
Absolutely not.
Do we want to talk about Tony Blair becoming the king?
Let's hope he never does. Can we just caveat that right at the beginning of the conversation?
His vanity would love that.
Or the president. I mean, that's that's a perfect reason to keep the monarchy, to stop people like Tony Blair becoming president.
Do you think you would put this story in context?
I think we should. What's happened, Nigel?
So this is in The Crown, and the Queen has a dream. So we have a dream scene, and the dream is that Tony Blair takes over as king.
It's not a dream, that's a nightmare.
I love this. I love The Crown, but this particular series of it, I've been really irritated about Di. Brilliant Di, by the way.
Yes, she's a brilliant actress.
But Di actually turning up as a ghost, you could have cut that out.
Yeah.
The idea of a dream that Tony Blair becomes king, and we haven't yet to see it yet, but I'd rather that wasn't there either. Let's try and keep to the facts as we know them, and then put the drama around it.
But they haven't stuck to the facts anyway. They've taken huge liberties with the facts, which they're allowed to because it's a drama.
Yeah, they are indeed. I mean, when I watched the last series, it was when I sort of tuned in. It was because that I'd been a royal correspondent during that period.
Right.
And broadly, they got the atmosphere right.
Yeah.
Just all the facts were muddled up, and the timeline was muddled up about what happened.
Nigel and Tanya, just stay with us for a moment. We're going to take another story today. We've got an MP waiting down the line. Porn websites in the UK will soon have to ensure that users are over 18 by checking their ID, asking for their bank or mobile providers to vouch for them, or using technology that can estimate their age from facial recognition.
Now, Joyce knows the Conservative MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge, Miriam Capes, who's part of that group called the New Conservatives, and she is a champion of this proposal. This is designed, presumably, Miriam, to protect young people from getting easy access to porn, which they can have now.
Yes, absolutely. So if we go back 15 or 20 years before the internet, pornography in this country was very tightly regulated. DVDs, magazines, those kind of things, subject to fairly strict laws and ratings, and quite a lot of material was completely illegal if it was found to be too harmful. But of course, the internet has changed all that, and some very hardcore violent pornography is now available at the click of a button. The average age of a child coming across it is about 11. So it has completely changed the landscape in terms of what our children are seeing. And as I said, this isn't the kind of magazines that some people of my generation and older might kind of remember from childhood, boys hiding behind the sheds at school. This is some serious, hardcore, violent, very misogynistic, often veering towards the completely illegal in terms of child abuse. That is giving our children sex education, and the consequences for society of that are enormous. We're hearing reports of girls being injured during sex, those kind of things. And the only answer really is to remove this material from our children's sight. So the online safety bill that went through Parliament over the last number of years, it's been a hugely long time coming. We managed to get this amendment in there at the last minute. That means that pornography sites have to put in this age verification very securely to prevent, as far as possible, under 18s from accessing it.
So, Miriam, does this mean that anybody over 18, anybody now, any consenting adult, if they want to watch pornography on the internet, will have to put in either their facial recognition or their bank details or some other form of identification?
They will have to do something that proves they are over 18, just as if you walked into an adult store and wanted to hire or purchase an adult DVD, you would have to show your legal age. Like you would buying alcohol. It's the same thing. And of course, it is illegal to watch pornography under 18. So this is just enforcing the law. But I think people do obviously have concern about our privacy. But let's think about it like think about going to a nightclub. If you go to a nightclub, you might show the bouncer your driving license. That proves you're over 18. But the bouncer doesn't keep your driving licence. He doesn't keep your details. He just sees in that one moment you are over 18. And there are plenty of technologies out there that can do the same, have the same effect online. And in France, they're doing something very, very similar to this. But you can use facial recognition. You can use third-party digital IDs that protect people's data and security. And of course, that's very important. But I think some of the free speech arguments against this are very spurious, because pornography is not free speech. It's not freedom of expression. It's illegal for children to watch it. It's very harmful. And the kind of pornography we're seeing online would be completely illegal in real life. So I think we have to be serious about this issue.
But if as a consenting adult, if you are a 40-year-old man now and you want to watch some pornography in the privacy of your own home, which you should be allowed to do, you will now have to put into there who you are, and that website will know, and that data will be stored, and who knows where that's going to go, Miriam?
No, that's what I'm saying. No, not necessarily. Now, a pornography company could choose to use that to take your details, but there are many other technologies out there, like facial recognition, which would prove that your facial structure is of an adult, but stores no data about who you are, or some of these third-party digital IDs, the equivalent of showing your driving license to a browser who stores no information about you. Those are available, and people use them all the time for other services, banking and things like that. Those technologies are out there. It doesn't have to be the case that you store data. So those are the kind of options looked at by Ofcom.
Listen, I admire, and I know that we share this ambition to protect our children from this sort of content. My concern is if you are a 17-year-old boy now and you have a natural evolutionary urge, you will not go onto those websites. You will find something more pernicious. You will go to the dark web. What do you think about that?
Well, of course, the dark web exists, but this is about reducing the availability. It's just like smoking or alcohol. You're not going to stop all children everywhere from watching this at all. That's just not possible. But you can drastically reduce the amount of children who come across this by accident. And that's what's so important, because we know that seeing violent pornography at a crucial brain development age, so, 11 to 13, changes boys' attitude to sex for their entire life and what they find pleasurable and what they want to do. We've got to stop that happening, and this is the only way. OK,
Miriam, great to see you. Thank you so much for clarifying.
I think she's incredibly persuasive, because I had some reservations about your rights, but I think it's very persuasive.
Just for a minute. Priti Patel authored the trip, then Suella Braverman went, and now James Cleverly. 3 Home Secretaries and 0 flights to Rwanda. Could Cleverly's visit turn the tide? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here with the Met Office forecast for GB News. Marked contrasts in the weather across the UK. Cold and frosty with some ice patches in the far north, but elsewhere actually rather a lot of cloud, frost-free, but outbreaks of rain continuing mostly where they left off at the end of yesterday. The rain does turn more showery across central and eastern England, and then the showers ease further west to sunny spells. But the brightest weather will be across Scotland, northern England, Northern Ireland as well. It's going to stay cold here with some icy patches first thing for northern Scotland, but actually for many a crisp winter's day. Same can't be said for the North Sea coast of England, where we're going to continue to see some showers and a keen breeze blowing into the evening. That does eventually also ease overnight, and with clear skies breaking out widely tonight, we're going to see another widespread frost with some freezing fog patches for central and southern Scotland, for example, into parts of northern England, especially the Vale of York, and some of these freezing fog patches will be slow to clear tomorrow morning, so continuing with the fog into lunchtime in some places. Away from the fog, actually plenty of sunny skies for Scotland, northern and eastern England. Even across parts of central England, we'll see some sunshine continuing into the afternoon. But for Northern Ireland, western fringes of England, Wales and Scotland, cloud thickens, outbreaks of rain return.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thanks, Aidan. Still to come, the Labour Council, which stole Christmas. The Tory MP of Lincoln, Carl McCartney, will be here to give his thoughts on the council that shut down a Christmas fair because it was too successful. Can you believe it? Well, just stay tuned. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist. And you survived? I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. on Tuesday the 5th of December. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Rwanda treaty crunch talks. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, will secure a deal with Rwanda today. We'll have the latest.
And yet another net migration crackdown. Have you heard this before? A 5-point plan set out by the government to slash migration by 300,000, but not yet. Won't start till the spring.
And Rishi Sunak suffered his first defeat in the House of Commons over the infected blood scandal yesterday, with a majority of MPs voting in favour of a new group to help compensate victims. We're going to be looking at the human cost of this tragedy with one of the Tory rebels.
Factor 8 was largely imported from the States, and blood often came from prisoners and drug addicts. Warnings it was not safe were ignored for years.
And Labour cancelled Christmas, the local council which shut down England's oldest Christmas market because, quotes, it was so popular it was a safety risk. We're talking to the local Tory MP who's not very happy, of course.
And if you're watching yesterday, you'll have seen how cross we were about that Christmas market in Lincoln being cancelled because it was too successful. What does that say about this country? All those traders who need that business.
Yeah.
I was very cross.
And Nigel Farage, he's still there in the jungle. I voted for him 5 times yesterday because somebody downloaded the app for me. The awful Nella got voted out. And if you want to make him king of the jungle,
yeah, that's right. Grab your phone, scan the QR code on the screen now. You can download the app and you can vote for Nigel 5 times a day for free. A vote for Nigel is a vote for GB News, in my opinion.
Absolutely right.
So let's make him king of the jungle, shall we? All that and a lot more this morning. First, though, your very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's just gone 2 minutes past 11. I'm Sam Francis in the GB Newsroom. Tory MPs voted against the government last night in favour of speeding up compensation for the victims of the infected blood scandal. 22 Conservatives backed the Labour-led amendment to set up a body to operate the compensation scheme. It's the Prime Minister's first defeat in the Commons, with the Haemophilia Society saying that Rishi Sunak should be ashamed that he was forced to do the right thing. Around 30,000 people were given contaminated blood in the 1970s and 80s, and since then 3,000 have died. The Home Secretary is in Rwanda as he works to secure a new treaty that the government hopes will revive the asylum policy. James Cleverly will spend the day meeting officials in Kigali. He'll discuss what's being called a migration and economic development partnership. It's hoped the new agreement, along with emergency legislation here at home, will address the issues that led to the Supreme Court's ruling against the plan in November. Meanwhile, the Immigration Minister has insisted that the first flights carrying asylum seekers will depart before the next general election. Meanwhile, the backlog of asylum cases here in the UK has fallen by nearly half in November as the government works to clear older cases by the end of the year. The Prime Minister has promised to work through all outstanding legacy cases. That's applications that are waiting for a decision since June last year. Thames Water has warned that it's in severe financial distress, and it says a turnaround will take time. The troubled water company's profits dropped by 54% in the 6 months to September, and its debts have ballooned. It reported around £1.3 billion in revenue, but it says it spent a record £1 billion on network improvements. It comes days after its parent company warned it could run out of money by April unless it secures more funding. Interim bosses say immediate and radical action is needed to secure the finances of the UK's biggest water supplier. Strikes by train drivers across parts of England are continuing today, causing delays and gridlock across the country. No C2C trains are running, while Greater Anglia services are also disrupted. More operators are set to strike in the coming days. Train drivers across England started a week-long ban on overtime as well last Friday, which is continuing to disrupt services. The managing director of C2C Trains says that he's disappointed that an agreement hasn't yet been reached with the ASLEF union. Trans women prisoners who have hurt or threatened women or girls will not be held in female prisons in Scotland. A new policy set out by the Scottish Prison Service will take an individualised approach to housing transgender people. It means that some prisoners will initially be placed in male prisons until more information is known about whether they should be housed in accordance with their chosen gender. Scotland's Justice Secretary says the policy supports the right of transgender people and the welfare of prisoners and staff. A legal challenge over Prince Harry's security arrangements will be held at the High Court later. The Duke of Sussex was stripped of special protections that are normally afforded to royals when he decided to step back from his role in 2020. Instead, he wants to pay police officers for security services when he and his family visit the UK. The previous decade has been titled the hottest on record, with polar and mountain ice melting at unprecedented rates. That's according to the United Nations Climate Agency. They say that Antarctic ice sheets have lost nearly 75% more ice between 2011 and 2020 than it did 10 years before. The hottest years of the decade were 2016 and 2020. More than 60 flood warnings are in place across England as heavy rain pushed out the snow. It follows a night of sub-zero temperatures as ice across the north of Scotland, where temperatures dipped as low as -10 overnight. And there's a further 182 flood alerts, with people being urged to stay cautious. And shoppers appear to be sticking to plans for a budget Christmas this year, with spending down. That's despite a Black Friday. UK retail sales increased by 2.7% in November. That's a significant drop on last year's figures. The numbers aren't adjusted, though, for inflation, masking a likely drop in the number of sales once higher prices are taken into account. That's the latest from GB News across the UK on your TV, in your car, digital radio and on your smart speaker. Now it's back to Andrew and Beth.
Good morning.
Lots of emails and texts coming in, and a lot of people picking up on the point I made about the useless permanent secretary at the Home Office saying they've lost 17,300 asylum seekers.
Yes.
Where they are.
They might have left.
I doubt it.
I'm being optimistic.
So David says 17,000 undocumented migrants roaming free is not a good position for any country to be in. A task force must be set up to find and deport this threat to the public right now.
Gordon has said, I was born and have lived in this country for 77 years. I've worked in engineering for 50 years, but I now ask myself, what was it all for?
You've probably got a lovely family, you've probably got a lovely home, hopefully nice friends.
And you've helped build this country, Gordon, into what it is. But I think there's a lot of people that feel like that. Steve has said, I'm disabled and my wife is my carer. If I were to have an outside carer at the unsociable hours, which she does without question, the cost would be astronomical.
Absolutely.
It is I think it's a real stain on this country, actually, that we have so many unpaid carers who are giving up time they could be going to work and earning a wage to look after people that they love.
They're the unsung heroes of the NHS.
They really are.
And Benita must have been listening to a conversation I had with the human rights lawyer. He said, why don't these human rights lawyers pay for these people they're fighting for? They'd soon stop then if the owner was putting them. Benita, you're paying for them because they're on legal aid.
A lot of them are, you're right.
A lot of them are. The legal aid bill is enormous.
And Terence said it's simple. The longer this goes on, the more it costs. The more essential services are overstretched, the more the UK becomes less of a united kingdom. The government are giving the country away. And, of course, Home Secretary James Cleverly is in Rwanda today.
He is.
Trying to do something about it. But I'm also always interested in thinking of people at home. Do you feel that a Labour government would do any better?
They'll do worse, because they've got no policy at all. I mean, at least Rwanda is an attempt at a deterrent. Look, we're going to go to Downing Street because our political editor, Chris Hope, has some breaking news.
Today from the government on this law. They're meant to try and work to bypass the court's objections to this Rwanda plan. They are telling me, in senior government sources, that this treaty being signed at lunchtime today by James Cleverly in Kigali is a first step. But the government, the MPs on the backbench are not yet convinced. Now, I understand that later today, early evening, there'll be a mass meeting of members of the European Research Group of Tory MPs and the New Conservatives group of Tory MPs. Often the Tory party breaks into these different cohorts of MPs to try and work out what they want. That is a really important meeting to work out how they're going to understand and accept whether the plans to bring down illegal migration yesterday are acceptable and what the plan might be on the illegal side of it, the 23,000 a year who arrive over the southern border into the south coast of England. So we're in a steady state of nothing happening quite yet here in Downing Street. We're going to hear more from the government around 11:30 at the briefing. I'll be there for that. But back to you.
We're joined now by the former editor of The Independent, Chris Blackhurst. Good morning, Chris, from one Chris to the next, if you're there, Chris. What really just struck me then was Christopher Hope saying that James Cleverly in Rwanda is the first step. And I just want to go, are you kidding me? The first step? This feels like that we've been walking a marathon for years on this. How can this be the first step, Chris?
It's the first step to get a new treaty signed, but it's, of course, just the beginning of what's going to be a long, drawn-out process. And, it'll go into the Commons, it'll go into the Lords, and it's going to drag on and on and on.
Chris, I was at the Conservative Home reception last night in Westminster, and I was talking about this earlier. I didn't find anyone who actually thought there was a prospect of a plane going to Rwanda before May or June, and I'm increasingly of the view that the election will be in the summer because of the small boats problem.
I think you're right. I don't see this getting through before the next election. And what's incredible about this, really, is that we're only dealing with such a small number of people. I mean, the actual overall migration is colossal, and this is now costing a fortune. They're going to station lawyers in Rwanda. I mean, British lawyers are going to now be based in Rwanda. They're throwing so much money at this, and it's crazy. It's going to take forever.
Should they throw in the towel, Chris? Is that the point? Or has the Prime Minister invested too much authority on it now?
Well, I think that's a very good point. This Prime Minister, as we both know, he's somebody who likes to stamp his foot and, what's the phrase, has the odd hissy fit. and which he did over the Elgin Marbles, and things become a point of principle for Rishi, and he can't be backed down. I mean, I still cannot believe there isn't an easier solution than flying people all the way to Rwanda. That's what's getting the human rights lawyers going. I mean, it just seems extreme, and I just can't believe there isn't an easier solution. I've never seen all the options laid out.
We was talking to a human rights lawyer earlier, actually, who was saying that he believes that they could solve this issue by having an online application system where you apply for asylum in the country in which you are currently residing. And at that point, the government here can decide whether you are allowed over or you are not. And he said that would stop the boats overnight. But he thought that the government aren't doing that because they use this issue to make political capital, and it's in their interest. We're talking about the boat people as opposed to talking about the NHS or the education or the legal migration. But I think that's a bit of a stretch, do you?
Yeah.
No, I don't actually. I think that there is an element of that. I think the whole small boats issue has become so overblown, and the numbers are actually small. Now, you could argue that if we don't stop the small boats, the numbers become huge. But when you look at the legal migration, 700,000, that's colossal. And if an online system works, I'm not sure. I mean, the idea of, what happens? People sit in Calais and fill in forms and then come across. I'm not sure how that works. But,
well, you could fill it in from Eritrea. You could fill it in from Syria. Well, you could go to the embassy in those countries and use their tech facility if you don't have them. Like, there are ways to make this happen, and it should be dead easy.
In theory, although if you're a genuine, let's get this clear. If you're a genuine legal asylum seeker, you're not someone who probably can go to embassies and fill in forms. I mean, in theory, your life's in danger.
Countries and get in a dinghy, like there is access to technology on your way.
Well, okay, but to actually present yourself with authorities, and I don't know. Look, all I know is I'm absolutely certain that there must be an easier way than this, and it's now costing. I mean, the figure I've just read, the government's put another £140 million into this. Well, let's do the maths. That's a hell of a lot per migrant, and we're only really talking about, in the end, it'll probably be a few hundred people. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Chris, we're coming up to whether the election is May or June or whenever. Do you think migration, because we've had Tory MPs in the studio all week saying that it's the #1 issue now on the doorstep, do you think it is, or will it still be the cost of living crisis and the economy?
All the people I know who are involved in private polling for the main parties, the #1 issue in this country, traditionally, and probably still is the NHS. The NHS and the economy. It will play big. Now, look, there's towns outside London where, I think of my hometown, which is Barrow-in-Furness in Cumbria. They've had a hotel in the centre of the town that's been taken over by migrants, and all properly done, but it's caused a lot of resentment in the town. It is a big issue. Whether it's bigger than the NHS economy, cost of living, I very much doubt.
Okay.
Right. That's Chris Black.
Thank you, Chris.
Former editor of The Independent. Great to talk to you. Still to come, we're going to be joined by the man tasked with trying to save Christmas.
That's right, it's not Santa. It's the Conservative MP for Lincoln, Carl McCartney, home of the cancelled Christmas market because it was going to be too popular. Yes, that's right. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:20 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, if you watched yesterday, you would have seen the steam coming out of mine and Andrew's ears. We talked about the fact that one of the UK's longest-running Christmas markets has been cancelled by the Labour Council. It's in Lincoln. It was deemed a safety risk.
Well, we're delighted to say in the studio with us is the Conservative MP for Lincoln, Carl McCartney. Steam been coming out of your ears ever since they banned it. Just take us through what this idiot council have done.
Well, back in February of this year, they announced without any previous even hint that they were thinking of not running a Christmas market. They just announced carte blanche that it was ended forever. Not just that we're going to take a year out to reorganise and make it safer, because that's the shield that they seem to be hiding behind. But the local police chief constable had a conversation with me and was happy to send me an email saying they have no problems with a Christmas market being run. An event like that can be managed properly. That sort of number of people can come into Lincoln and be very safely
and the reason they cancelled it, Carl, was because they decided last year there were too many people there. It was a victim of its own success.
That's what they claim, but many of us think that's just a poor excuse for a reason for cutting the Christmas market.
But were there problems last year?
There were a few problems with overcrowding, but not things that were insurmountable.
Like ambulances queued up round the block?
No, there weren't. People just felt uncomfortable, and it was crowded at times. It even was on the Thursday night when it opened.
Isn't that good? What's wrong with that?
Well, we want to see. Ultimately, the Christmas market brought
Oxford Street in Christmas.
It brought lots of people into Lincoln.
Yeah.
It was a great window on a beautiful city, which I have the honour and privilege of representing.
How many police were there last year?
Not as many as in previous years, and they're obviously the professionals. And so,
why? What do you mean?
Well, I think the police have training in crowd management and control. And I think the conversation I had with the Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner, who both agree that a Christmas market could safely take place in Lincoln, with those numbers, it will be manageable, and actually it previously has been. So last year were good numbers, 320,000 people visited Lincoln, but previously... 320,000 over 4 days. Amazing. But previously, there's been 2 years where we've had even more visitors than that, and there weren't the problems that the Labour City Council have put up, that the reason why they've cancelled the Christmas market. So that must be
millions of pounds coming into Lincoln City.
At least 15 million. And not just Lincoln City.
Amazing.
That's also the county of Lincolnshire, because it was a window on Lincoln, but also the gateway to Lincolnshire. And so all those visitors who came in for the Christmas market saw what a beautiful city we have. It's an ideal situation. You've got a beautiful cathedral, Pemberton said worth 2 of everybody else's cathedrals. It is a beautiful...
It's stunning.
Beautiful range. Right next to the castle. You've got Castle Square in between. The castle's got one of the 4 copies of the Magna Carta in. Lincoln's got lots of things going for it, and you can't pay for that sort of advertising.
No. So what reason have the council given? They're just saying, we're just keeping you safe. That old trope that we're getting very used to now, aren't it? It's our responsibility to keep you safe. We're going to decide for you. Am I right in thinking that the mayor of the region, is he called Biff Bean?
Well, mayor of the city of Lincoln.
The city.
Very traditional position.
So Biff, who's biffed the market, did he go to any overseas markets this year?
One of the reasons we have the Christmas market in Lincoln, it celebrated its 40th year last year, one of the first Christmas markets in the country. We have a twinning arrangement with Neustadt in Germany, which is where the idea of a Christmas market came from. And it turns out that actually, having voted last Tuesday once again to keep the Christmas market cancelled, as all the Labour councillors did, and Biff Bean is a Labour councillor, he then enjoyed the Christmas market, joie de vivre, if you like, over in Neustadt at the weekend.
Presumably the local taxpayer paid his airfare on the 20th.
I don't think he paid for it, but I think there's a duality, whereas when the Neustadt
you can go and enjoy
team
the
come
Neustadt
over,
Christmas market, but votes to deny it.
Exactly.
What are the traders thinking, Carl? Because this must be a big blow for them.
So a man and woman not happy. Many of those who have shops, etc., do very well in that first week in December, but they also take stalls. The City Council charge people up to £4,500 for a stall over those 4 days, because those stalls do make a lot of money. With that amount of footfall, you can't fail to, unless you're really bad at selling things,
hitting
to make
own revenue.
Well, indeed, but those stall holders, as I say, were also business owners in Lincoln. Lots of other charities, etc., also had stalls.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, because I could talk to you all day about this, but am I right in thinking these councillors just can't be bothered? Does this affect the revenue they get? Does this affect their job? If they just thought, I'd quite like a quiet Christmas, I can't be bothered with dealing with this?
Some might say that, I believe.
I would say that.
Their allowances don't get affected at all. The senior officers at the City Council, I'm sure, they won't be taking a pay cut through not having a Christmas market, or their pensions won't be affected. But actually, all the businesses who pay business rates, all the council taxpayers in Lincoln who pay their council tax, will not have the benefit and the enjoyment of a Christmas market at this point. My reason for sitting here now, and with the media campaign that I'm running, along with many other people, is to bring the Christmas market back for next year, for December 2024.
Because they've actually said it's banned for good.
Yeah, and I've had communication from those who are in very senior positions who basically said, the Labour Council said, you are to do nothing in the next 4 to 5 years that in any way promotes or allows or permits a Christmas market to take place.
We've got to read a statement, and we'll get you to respond to it, Carl. This is from Councillor Rick Metcalfe. You'll know him. He's the leader of the City of Lincoln Council, Labour, of course. He said, we understand some people's disappointment. Lincoln Christmas market is no more. The decision was announced 9 months ago on the basis we could not continue delivering an event that had been deemed a significant risk to public safety.
He goes on to say, Lincoln at Christmas remains a stunning place to visit, with lights all across the city centre, our new ice trail and traditional festivities taking place this weekend. What's he not telling us there, Carl?
He's not telling us the truth, is he? They just took the easy option. It's easier not to do something than to do something. And my view is actually those people who pay their taxes in Lincoln have enjoyed a Christmas market. Yeah. There is no reason. And yes, I understand you can use safety issues as a shield, if you like, for your decision. But actually, anything can be mitigated. Everything can be planned for, and things can be done that would make it a safer environment.
Go and have a wristband. So you go on the Thursday, you go on the Friday.
Yeah.
There's just no.
There are those options,
but the local people.
They were given an easy out last week. The Labour councillors, they were said not to have definitely a Christmas market, just to have a conversation about all those different options. As you say, say, ticketed areas, maybe actually have it over a longer period of time, maybe 2 weekends rather than one. All those different things you could do, but they just carte blanche do not want to even engage in that conversation.
As well. It's kids, right, who love a Christmas market. This is the memories they're making. It's the elderly who may not have that many more Christmases ahead of them and want to go and have a mulled wine with the grandchildren in the square.
But it's also going to drive local people to other towns.
Well, yeah, there's lots of other towns. My colleagues in Doncaster said they've been trying to have a Christmas market in Doncaster for years. Obviously, you've got York, not too far away, Leeds, Manchester, Nottingham. Everywhere would like to have what Lincoln had. And Lincoln just decided to throw that all out. Or the Labour city councillors did. Right. You know, everybody in Lincoln loves Christmas. It just seems that the Labour city councillors don't.
Are they also playing politics a bit at the moment, do you think, Carl? Could it be that the Labour councillors are going, you know what, let's just make everyone just hate this country. It's just going to be miserable. We're going to have a rubbish Christmas. And then when it comes to the election next year, they're all going to think, right, we're going to vote for Labour because look how miserable our Tory-run country is.
Potentially, but I'm not going to let them do that. I'm a proud Member of Parliament for Lincoln. I love the city. It's very like Chester, where I did a lot of my growing up. And I see my job as the Member of Parliament, and actually most Members of Parliament should do the same, is to promote the city, the area, the constituency that you represent. So I do my best to bang the drum for Lincoln, but the Labour city councillors decided to cut my legs off.
Am I right in thinking your area relies on a lot of fruit picking, a lot of immigration as well?
Lincolnshire does, as a county. Lincoln not so much, but we do have quite a lot of transient population. We have a proud history with Polish people who came over during the Second World War, obviously known as Bomber County, Lincolnshire, having a proud association with the RAF, and I have one of the largest bases in my constituency at RAF Waddington.
So are you supporting Rwanda?
Definitely. Been supporting it for a long time, and yes, the lawyers have done very well out of it so far, haven't they?
I had a bit of a dust up with the human rights lawyer earlier. Said, "Hang on, mate, it's part of your industry is part of the problem." Do you really think, realistically, though, Carl, that there's going to be a plane up in the air in the next 6 months to Rwanda?
I certainly hope so, and I believe from the very top of our party down, that we all hope so. But if there isn't, we'll know why the reason there isn't. And that's because the Conservative government will have tried everything they can, and that includes we make the laws in Parliament. We are a sovereign nation now. Yes, following Brexit, which is now 6-7 years ago. And if we're not allowed to, that's because the lawyers and the Labour Party, either in the House of Commons or the House of Lords, will have done everything they can to stop it. They haven't voted for any of our measures so far, and the Conservative Party, and we're not giving up on it. Because it's something that we know our constituents want to see happen.
And Yvette Cooper in the Commons yesterday, the Shadow Home Secretary, she huffed and puffed about James Cleverly's announcement, the 5-point plan, but she didn't say Labour will vote against it. And she also didn't say what Labour would do.
I haven't said what they'll do with anything, really, have they?
No.
You know, on any big decision, they seem to dither and just waiting to see which way they'll come. It's a fence that's very strong at the moment. There's an awful lot of Labour politicians sitting on it.
You've got a big issue, though, with the Prime Minister's popularity. On a personal level, he does not cut through with the public. They do not think that he represents them.
Yeah, so I'm on a 1922 executive, so we have conversations with the Prime Minister that are heart-to-heart and face-to-face.
How does he take it when you say that people don't like you?
Well, I think we're all very supportive. Obviously, we've got a general election coming in the next year.
Does he know? Does he know?
And I think he feels it, you know. He doesn't have to do the job. He wanted to do the job, and he's doing the job to the best of his ability.
But no one's going to vote for him.
He wants to be better. No, I think they will. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised in the media, per se.
Now, let me ask you, if you're in the 1922 executive, we know it's a top secret, but do you even have a hint of how many letters demanding a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister have been submitted?
I'm not an officer. I'm a member of the executive, and the chairman, Sir Graham Brady, keeps it very close to his chest.
He's so discreet, isn't he?
He is, and very well versed, and he's done it for quite a few years now.
Yes,
I don't think the fellow officers know.
Right.
Of which there's 5. I think Sir Graham keeps it very close to his chest. He has a safe in his office, and that's where they go.
I mean, Bev doesn't agree with it. I
don't know how big that safe is.
But I think if Tory MPs triggered another leadership contest for the election, they'd be madness. It'd be complete madness.
Well, let's see.
He's the leader.
A week is no longer a long time in politics. It's an eon. You know, it's not even 24 hours now with the news cycle as it is. So, you know, an hour can be a long time in politics.
I think at the moment, if he's still there, you might as well write it all off. However, if Labour Council in Lincoln is anything to go by, that's a glimpse of our future, where where there's no joy in the world, where everything gets shut down for your own good, for your safety.
Think they know best.
They do. I'm a happy and positive Member of Parliament for Lincoln. It's a lovely, great city, probably the most well-loved city.
Right, Carl.
in the country.
If you want us to get involved with a campaign to bring back the Christmas market next year, we are right there by
it's
your
good to have me in
side.
today. You've helped just by having me here today.
And the people of Lincoln, we are on your
good
side.
Good luck with the campaign, because it's an outrage, Labour councillors, if you're listening, and flipping outrage. And we did invite Labour councillors to come on, and they gave us that dreary statement instead.
Yeah. Right, thanks so much. OK, moving on now. Blood vote rebellion. Sunak has suffered his first Commons defeat in a Tory revolt over infected blood payouts. One of the Tory rebels will join us very shortly. It's a really interesting story, this. I didn't know a huge amount about, but you're across that, aren't you, Andrew?
Very important.
Right.
All now, we'll get our headlines now with Sam.
Andrew, thank you. Good morning. It's just gone 11:32. The headlines this hour. GB News understands that new legislation that could enable migrants to be sent to Rwanda for processing will not be published today. The Home Secretary is in Rwanda today working on a new agreement, but senior government sources say that the new treaty being signed in Kigali is just a first step. It's hoped the new agreement, along with emergency legislation here in the UK, will address the issues that led to the Supreme Court ruling against the government's plan in November. Meanwhile, the backlog of asylum cases in the UK fell by nearly half in November, as the government works to clear older cases by the end of the year. The Prime Minister has promised to work through all outstanding legacy cases. That's applications that are waiting for a decision since June last year. Tory MPs voted against the government last night in favour of speeding up compensation for victims of the blood scandal. 22 Conservatives backed the Labour-led amendment to set up a body to operate the compensation scheme. It was the Prime Minister's first defeat in the Commons. Around 30,000 people were given contaminated blood in the 1970s and 80s. Since then, 3,000 have died. Thames Water has warned that it's in severe financial distress and a turnaround will take time. The troubled water company's profits dropped by 54% in the 6 months to September as its debts ballooned. It reported around £1.3 billion in revenue, but it says it spent a record £1 billion on network improvements, and its parent company warns it could run out of money by April. That's unless it secures more funding. Interim bosses say immediate and radical action is needed to secure the finances of the UK's biggest water supplier. Well, that's the latest headlines from GB News. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2642 and €1.1669. The price of gold is £1,602.89 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,463 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson intends to tell the COVID inquiry that he didn't lock down sooner on the advice of scientists tomorrow. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist. And you survived? I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:38 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So we are joined back in the studio now by political commentator Tony Buxton and GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Right, let us start with Boris at the COVID inquiry. Oh, Nigel, you go first while my blood pressure rises.
Well, we've got him Wednesday and Thursday, so it'll be interesting to see what he comes up with. Be nice if he made an apology.
He won't?
He will. I think he will. I think he will.
Well, he'll apologise for all the wrong things like everybody does.
And on the serious front, the suggestion seems to be that he will argue he was following the science all the way through, and the science in the early days was herd immunity rather than lockdown.
Yeah.
So when Matt Hancock said last week we should have locked down 3 weeks earlier, I think Matt Hancock was right, by the way. We should have locked down 3 weeks earlier. Boris will say, well, I was being told by the scientists that herd immunity is the best bet. Lockdown should be a last resort, and only when we think the public will actually go along with it. There was a fear at the time that people would simply ignore it.
Yeah.
I do remember Patrick Vallance on the radio talking about herd immunity.
Science advisor, yeah.
Yeah, the chief scientific advisor talking about herd immunity. I basically wasn't sure. I mean, none of us knew what we were dealing with there.
Apocalyptic prediction. We went to herd immunity. It would lead to 500,000 lives.
Lies.
That was the
lies, false modelling, like as always when it comes from that team, right? So it's lies and it's false modelling. They had some brilliant scientists that they could have listened to, like Sunita Gupta, and the Great Barrington scientists we could have got out of this. Our country would not be in the mess it's in now if we had listened to them. And what's really making my blood boil, it's uncontrollable, is that the questions that are being asked at the COVID inquiry are rubbish. They're rubbish, stupid questions skirting about the fact that the point is we should never have locked down. We should have done what Sunita Gupta said and actually targeted the vulnerable. Because let me tell you that even the vaccine wasn't about stopping people catching the virus. So locking people down is to stop people catching the virus. Even the vaccine doesn't do that. What you have to do is protect the vulnerable and let everybody else get on with their lives.
Tonya, think about the timeline, that we're talking about the early stages before we actually knew what we were dealing with.
We've had decades of pandemic responses.
And
we
that's
knew
exactly
what to do, and they completely turned it over and locked people in because there was too much to gain.
Decades and I mean, I know I get into trouble when I say this, but decades and hundreds of years of pandemics, we have the same mitigations in place at the first stages as we did during the Black Death.
Nigel, they knew very, very early on. That's why these scientists were saying this initially on television. They said we're going to have herd immunity. You're going to have like just flu-like symptoms for most people, and a few people, unfortunately, will die, like they do every year of flu and things like that. This one, luckily, in my opinion, unlike things like swine flu, luckily it hits the old and the vulnerable.
Well, not
people
luckily.
That are end of life.
Even the old shouldn't die.
Because if it was young children, then I would understand what this was done. If it was going to hurt teenagers and young people, the people that have been most hurt by this lockdown, I would understand it. You know, if you're end of life and you die a month early or 6 months early...
But the modelling, Tonya, you were talking about earlier in rubbishing, that modelling is not a prediction of what will happen.
You can do what you like with modelling.
Modelling is a warning of what might happen,
yes,
and that was the situation.
Did it happen with anything else that had been modelled by Oxford? No.
And also, you have to ask who is incentivising those modellers to come up with how is that department being funded, for instance, in the case of Neil Ferguson. You know, are there conflicts of interest here? And that's what I would like the COVID inquiry to talk about. And also, partly, you know, it's partly to do with you and you. It's partly the media. It was the newspapers as well. And interestingly, Stanley Johnson, when he was on last week, when we said about Boris and the decisions he was having to make, he said, look, it was the pressure from the press, from the media, because everybody was talking about how many people are going to die, and I get it. So newspapers, you know, TV channels, except GB News, not always. TV channels, daytime TV channels, had higher viewing figures than they could ever have possibly imagined. So it was in their interest to keep the fear going, keep the fear going. You know, I'm thinking particularly of some other morning shows, not on this channel, who kept that fear alive with a ticking number of people who died from COVID. And so the politicians responded to that pressure.
But Bev, on the media front, we didn't know what we were dealing with either. No. Suddenly I was confronted with something that, way out of my experience, I found myself spending nearly 2 years talking to scientists rather than politicians, and I had to learn along the way, much as the government did. And even when it came to the vaccines, we were suddenly presented with this incredible responsibility. What if those vaccines were going to damage children? What if they were going to kill adults? Do you issue that warning? And if you do issue that warning...
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
Hang on. If you do issue that warning at that time while people were having their jabs, what it would mean is that you were taking responsibility for people not having their jabs.
No, you would have had informed... You would have informed consent.
But it wasn't informed.
We had our human rights completely obliterated. We had no informed consent. Listen, I am a fit person.
You could have refused.
I look after
you could
myself.
refuse to have the vaccine.
Oh, unless you wanted to go into a nightclub.
You could not do that. You couldn't go anywhere unless you couldn't travel. My parents are sick. You had to do all these things.
Well, yes, there is a consequence for refusing, but you are able.
Thrown out of the window. Our morality as a nation was thrown out of the window because
you could have refused.
Have conformed to it. You could not. People were losing jobs in work. Listen, if it wasn't for the Together Declaration, the NHS staff would have lost their jobs because they didn't want to get vaccinated.
Tonya,
the care staff lost their jobs because they didn't want to get vaccinated. And we know that this particular medication only stops you from dying terribly. It doesn't stop you from catching it.
Tonya, the point I'm making is, imagine a situation where I'm talking to all those people, the people that you're talking about...
How often do you speak to Sunita Gupta? Or Carl Hennigan,
or Dr. Malone. I know I did talk to her once. But anyway, regardless of the names, talking to those people who were saying the vaccine was dangerous and talking to the scientists who said it wasn't.
And often
at the end of the day, you had to make a responsible decision, and I went down on the side of the ones who I thought were most sensible, and that was the scientists who were saying the vaccine wasn't dangerous and was absolutely essential.
And Nigel, can I just say that you've gone down that line and you're still incredibly wrong. So it just shows you the brainwashing of the media. Because you still believe that lockdowns worked, and we know that they didn't.
You follow a narrative
wrong on most issues, let's be honest, because he comes to things from the left incredibly wrong.
But he's a charming man, yes, though, that's all I can say.
He's wrong on most things. I mean, I don't think you and I ever agree on everything.
And also, one of the things that's going on at the moment is Andrew Bridgen is talking about the vaccine harms.
He's the MP.
The MP. He's talking about vaccine harms with a selection of absolutely brilliant doctors. And we are the only channel here talking about it. This should be in the media. Have the vaccines hurt people? Are they causing the excess deaths that we've got in this country at the moment? This is a debate that should be on every single news channel, in the front of every single newspaper.
So this was...
And unfortunately, it is not.
So this was a debate that happened last night, because this is on our list, actually. This was in Parliament last night. Andrew Bridgen got together a group of the main protagonists. And I know you say, and I have had it thrown at me for 3 years, people say, oh, but you pull these names out of the hat. Well, these are the names of the people who had an alternative opinion. And that is all I've ever wanted, is an open debate on this issue. That's literally all I ever wanted. And Andrew Bridgen got together last night a group of people, including Robert Malone, Angus Dalgleish, Pierre Corey, Stephen Kirsch. There will be people in this audience watching who have no idea who they are, and there'll be other people who say these are going to be the heroes of history because they've been raising alarm bells for informed consent and balance for the last 3 years. Why does it take somebody like Andrew Bridgen now, even now, Nigel, a man who has also been discredited and is no longer a member of the Conservative Party for his position, to bring these sorts of people together to have this debate? Because it's a lack of free speech which bothers me, keeps me awake at night.
Well, I mean, Andrew Bridgen is perfectly entitled to bring these people together. Andrew is a friend of mine. This has become an obsession of his.
Obsession sounds a little derogatory. How about it's become an area that he's researched intensely?
OK, well, I've talked to Andrew Bridgen about this in quite some detail, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of where he's actually going with it. And the point here is, let's just suppose Andrew's right and the vaccines were doing huge harm. The question I can't get to the bottom of is, do we think the government made some kind of terrible mistake, or do we think there was some kind of conspiracy going on? And what comes out of the kind of people that Andrew collects around him is, it seems like it's the idea it was a conspiracy. I'd be prepared with the evidence in front of me to accept a mistake.
I have a massive problem with that word, because I think when it is a convergence of benefit for multiple people, and that might be financial benefit, it might be reputational benefit, that is getting written off as a conspiracy, where it actually might just have been that there was money to be made, Tonya.
Absolutely.
Or there was fame to be had, or there was control to be sought.
We do need to understand why we've got rid of decades
but that would be criminal.
of planning.
That would be criminal if that was happening.
Which is kind of what some of us have been saying.
I know,
but Nigel, I do believe it was criminal. That's the point. That's why it has to be debated.
But you guys believe the vaccine causes damage, and I'm saying that the vaccine caused no more damage, in fact less damage, than most other vaccines that we've been given.
But this is not a traditional vaccine. You do understand that this is a novel vaccine that people didn't even know about, but we were not informed as to that. Our human rights to have informed knowledge about what we're putting into our body was not given to us, and that is something that hasn't happened since the Second World War. I mean, it's insane that they continue.
But that was exactly the problem I'm talking about. We were faced with earlier on.
Being told, why do these breakfast television programmes that some of us were saying, this vaccine is 100% effective, it's 100% won't harm you, it's 100% stop you from getting or transmitting the vaccine? Why have these people not been taken to task and Ofcom find them and warn them the way that we were told off constantly if we mentioned or tried to have a debate about them? Why has that not happened?
We do have to move on, passionate as it is, because we do have to talk about the Tories suffering their biggest Commons defeat last night in the Commons. Now, this is an incredibly important story, Nigel. This is the scandal of infected blood that people who maybe the haemophiliacs had a blood transfusion. Some of this blood had been bought in cheap from Australian prisons.
Yes, and American prisons.
And American prisons.
Yep.
People are dying at the rate of 1 a week. 30,000 people still waiting for compensation. And the Tories...
And compensation is urgent.
Urgent. And so last night, the government was defeated by a rebellion of backbench Tory MPs because the suggestion was, let's not get into the mechanics of what the amendment was, but the Tories seem to be dragging their feet on getting the compensation.
I mean, the great thing about the result of this vote is that it shows that MPs can do the right thing by voting with their conscience.
Yeah. It was his first defeat as
Prime Minister.
And the first whipped vote defeat, I think, since the general election in 2019.
Yeah.
It's a scandal, the infected blood. And the compensation bill will be around 20 billion, probably the biggest ever.
As it should be.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're hearing case after case, isn't it? People are dying still today, every day from this.
Before they get their compensation?
Before they even get their compensation. Children have died. I was reading a story of a young child who died at 4 years old because he was given a blood transfusion. He died the weight of a 10-month-old baby. Can you imagine being the parent of that?
Yeah.
And then what was Rishi thinking? what was he thinking by not passing this through and doing the right thing? It makes me doubt his moral judgment.
I suspect it was... I mean, I don't know quite why the Tories got themselves into...
I don't know why they would have died on that hill. They seem to be ridiculous.
Because it was only going to be delaying it for about 3 or 4 months.
That's right. And what was ridiculous about it was that the Tory whips knew that there was a big head of steam coming up, that an awful lot of Tories had signed the amendment, which in fact was the one that was passed last night. So they knew what was coming. The simple thing is, why do you actually hold the line? Why not say, look, the compassionate, the right thing to do is this, and this is what we should do.
And the key must be now, Nigel, do the Tories think, the government say, right, OK, we've heard the Commons, we will carry on with the compensation payment sooner rather than later, or do they try and reverse it?
No, they can't reverse it. I mean, this Parliament's decided, therefore it'll go ahead.
Yeah, and that's quite right.
Which is right, which is what Parliament should be for.
Yeah.
Shall we finish on a slightly lighter note?
Yes.
Do we want to talk about Pamela Anderson wearing no makeup or Christmas jokes? I'm not doing Christmas jokes. It's too early for Christmas jokes. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that yet.
They weren't funny anyway.
Let's talk about Pamela Anderson. So you will have known Pamela Anderson,
I met her
lady
in
of
France.
big boobs and Baywatch, right? That's
Very
what she's
big
famous
boobs.
for. And Tonya, she's making this radical decision, and it shouldn't be radical, to go makeup free everywhere.
Well, I think she's kind of trying to say this whole thing because she's actually got great bone structure and she's very pretty and she wants to go without makeup, and that's fine.
Andrew,
it's fine, but I don't answer the door without sunglasses and lipstick on, so I don't understand what she... Oh, no, gosh, no. I don't... I mean...
Oh, to be a woman, Nigel.
She should do what she likes, but I think it...
These are the kind of conversations we stay out of.
She's 56.
I'm keeping out of it.
She's a year older than me, and so she's... I admire her, but I don't understand the point she's making. I don't understand. I try to always look my best. I always try to put a little bit of lippy, a little bit of blush on. What's the point she's making? I think that she's struggling with the fact that she was seen as the Baywatch girl, big boobs, red cosy,
and rather
blonde
surgically
hair,
enhanced too.
and enhanced, whatever. So she's trying to make an intellectual argument about not wearing makeup, which I don't think is fair. So I'm not sure I agree with her.
I quite like seeing what a normal 56-year-old woman with no makeup on looks like.
Well, is she normal? Has she not had a bit of help?
No, I don't think facially. No, maybe she might have had a little bit. But again, but even with help, I mean, you know, like you say, Tonya,
she looks beautiful.
Does that forehead not look Botox?
I wouldn't be on a red carpet with no makeup like that. I admire her bravery.
Well, I mean, it's not a question. Well, no. The trouble is, I always get into trouble if you start making comments about this. I mean, I just like the idea that a woman can go out with as little makeup or no makeup as possible, as Pamela Anderson does.
Be careful, your wife is watching. Just be very careful.
I will get in the neck when I get back.
But I think for our teenage daughters to see a woman looking that natural and barefaced,
but they'll look at it and say, I don't want that.
But I won't be doing it anytime soon.
Well,
right, thank you so much.
I think you look a lot better. And Pamela Anderson, much better.
Nigel Nelson, Tonya Buxton, thank you so much as always. That is it from Britain's Newsroom for today. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily. We will see you tomorrow.
See you then.
Don't worry, Bev and Andrew. We've got our war paint on this afternoon.
I wouldn't go anywhere without a full face of makeup.
Certainly not. But we'll be watching James Cleverly in Rwanda with a keen eye to see whether he gets this treaty signed, this all-important treaty, and will it be a step towards actually seeing those deportation flights take off?
Yes, less than an hour to go until the pen touches the paper, and a press conference from the Home Secretary will have it all. Stick with us on Good Afternoon Britain.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. It'll stay rather wet and cloudy across southeastern areas throughout the day, but elsewhere it will turn brighter, though we are expecting some quite widespread fog tonight. So staying cloudy across southeastern areas because this area of low pressure that's brought some rain to many southern and central areas is clearing off to the east. So that means we've got the remnants of some cloud from that through much of the afternoon for central areas, but you will start to see some more brightness, but it will stay damp and drizzly across southeastern areas. Further north, after a pretty cold start to the day, there will be a decent amount of sunshine through the day, but coastal areas will stay that much cloudier, but temperatures rising to about 4 or 5 degrees in the sunshine. Then through tonight, that clearer weather will become more widespread with a gap between weather fronts. So that means that we've got plenty of clear spells developing across the UK, and it will be a cold and frosty night with temperatures widely dipping down into towards -5 degrees. We could be as low as -8 in parts of Scotland by the start of Wednesday morning. Potentially some extensive fog and mist that could be fairly slow to clear for parts of Wales and southern areas of England. And then throughout Wednesday, we start to see this area of rain arrive from the west. So that'll bring some outbreaks of rain, particularly into the evening across parts of Northern Ireland. And then that rain will spread eastwards throughout Thursday, bringing a rather damp day on Thursday. But on Wednesday, we've still got some bright sunny spells. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.